Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Back in June, we learned that the Liberal government's financial advisor approached the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, raising the idea of the Canada Pension Plan investing in the Liberals' government's plan to purchase the Trans Mountain pipeline. As we know, the pipeline was actually already 65 years old before the Liberals brought it, and brought it for $4.5 billion using public funds. It is bad enough that the Liberal government decided to spend $4.5 billion of public funds on an old leaky pipeline. Imagine, at the drop of the hat, the Liberals felt the need to truly back up their talk on climate change action and spend $4.5 billion transitioning Canada into a cleaner, greener economy and putting Canada on a pathway to be a global leader in green technology. Imagine what that would be like if that had happened instead. It's worse that following the deal, the senior executives of the Texas oil company the Liberal government bailed out, they literally, I think, laughed all the way to the bank, cashing in on $1.5 million in bonuses just to continue their jobs. It's even worse when this bailout is for a project that the federal court found the National Energy Board's review failed to include increase in tanker traffic and the negative impact that it would have had for endangered killer whales, and that it also failed in its duty to engage in meaningful consultations with First Nations before giving the green light to the project. It is inexcusable that the Liberal government is failing to follow through on its promise to scrap tax subsidies to fossil fuel industries. And finally, it simply cannot be defended when all of these bad decisions are made in the face of the greatest issue facing our generation, and that is how we deal with climate action. Where there is unprecedented forest fires, record floods, increasingly radical weather patterns, the acidification of our oceans, or the melting of ice caps, we are faced with catastrophic situations if we do not take real action now. To limit global temperature increases to 1.5 degrees, Canada needs to lower our emissions to 335 million tons by 2030. And according to the government's own performance report, we will only get down to 500 million tons. We are not even close, Madam Speaker, and bailing out tax oil companies won't get us to our targets. Public tax dollars funding executive bonuses instead of green energy infrastructure won't help us reduce emissions. Continuing to subsidize the fossil fuel industry through generous tax giveaways will not incentivize investment into green technology. Failing to consult with Indigenous peoples impacted by these ill-advised projects flies in the face of our commitments on reconciliation. And yet the government now sees it fit to have the advisors pitching to the Canada Pension Plan to invest in this leaky pipeline. Not only is the government making a terrible financial decision now on climate change, but they are trying to sell the Canada Pension Plan, tying future generations to this bad decision, Madam Speaker, is the wrong way to go.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question, and I'm pleased to stand today for my colleague to answer the question more fully. First of all, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to note that this is the government that has introduced a price on pollution to no longer make pollution free in order to address climate change, which we agree, Madam Speaker, is the most important issue of our time. And we as a government are moving the Canadian people in the right direction with regards to putting a price on pollution. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to have the opportunity today to highlight the importance of the Trans Mountain Expansion project to Canadians. It is a project that means thousands of good, well-paying jobs for the middle class, including in British Columbia, where the honourable member from Vancouver East comes from. It will help us get a fair price for Canadian resources. At a time when 99% of Canada's oil exports are destined for the United States, it makes sense to seek other buyers for our resources. In the past 2 months, we have reached important milestones related to the project. We had the Federal Court of Appeals decision related to the Trans Mountain Expansion Project, which provided us with a way forward. We have reinitiated Phase 3 consultations with First Nations impacted by the expansion project. Through these consultations, we will ensure that Indigenous voices are at the table as we move forward in the process. De plus, le gouvernement
Furthermore, the government appointed former Supreme Court Justice, the Honourable Frank Yakabuchi, as a federal representative to supervise the consultation process. He will ensure that the consultations with Indigenous peoples will be meaningful and will respect the Federal Court of Appeals ruling. Madam Speaker, Justice Yakabuchi has had a lot of experience with consultations with Indigenous peoples in the past. And I'm very proud of this because he acted as a mentor for me in my career. And I'm also of Italian-Canadian origin. As a government, we take our responsibilities seriously. We want this project to go forward, but we also want to ensure that it does so in a way that protects the public interest. This means ensuring the highest possible level of governance, including environmental protection, respecting our commitments to Indigenous peoples, and protecting Canadian investment in a responsible manner.
With regards to the honourable member's comments on the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, Madam Speaker, I would like to remind this House that the CPPIB operates at arm's length from governments. I'd also like to highlight its strong investment track record. The CPPIB's 10-year annualized nominal rate of return is 8%, and Canada's chief actuary has confirmed that the legislative contribution rates are sufficient to ensure the sustainability of the CPP for at least 75 years. That's for both the base CPP and the enhanced portion of the plan. Which brings me to my second point, Madam Speaker, the enhancement of the CPP. The agreement to enhance the CPP reached by the Minister of Finance with his provincial counterparts in June 16 is one of this government's most important achievements. It will mean more money for Canadians when they retire so that they can worry less about their savings and focus more on enjoying time with their families. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Madam Speaker, the Liberal government continues to talk a big game on climate change, but their actions undermine their own rhetoric. Climate leaders don't fail to consult Indigenous communities. Climate leaders don't buy 65-year-old leaky pipelines with public funds, and climate leaders don't hand out massive tax breaks for the fossil fuel industry. And climate leaders certainly don't put the retirement security of future generations at risk by pitching investments into a disastrous pipeline bailout. This government needs to recognize that putting a stop to the excessive blowing of hot air on alleged climate action would likely have more an impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions than any action they're actually taking. What would it take for the Liberal government to finally stop undermining their own talk by bankrolling their corporate friends in the fossil fuel industry?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, climate change leaders put a price on pollution. Climate change leaders take care to protect endangered species. Climate care leaders also have a responsibility to their people in order to make sure that the environment and the economy go hand in hand. And in that light, Madam Speaker, the Trans Mountain project is a sound investment. The government purchased the expansion because as a government we can manage risks that in these particular circumstances would have been difficult for any private sector company to bear. The
Trans Mountain Expansion Project will help communities, including Indigenous communities. And thanks to Canada's Ocean Protection Plan, this project can be achieved while still protecting Canada's coasts and navigable waterways. This project is an investment in Canada's future. Once implemented, it will allow us to safely ship oil resources to world markets, including Asian markets. This will give Canadian producers more possibilities to get a fair price for their product.
The Honourable Member
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte.